Good evening, everyone. We still have some seats towards the front. I think we've got at least 12 seats in the front, some of which are just by themselves. But please come down. If you don't want to sit in the front row, we do have overflow, but that's unfortunately only audio. You won't get to see the bright and smiling faces of our attractive panelists here. So. Clearly, if no other reason than to be in the presence of Hans Butzer, you must come down and sit in the front row. No one else? Okay, well, let's go ahead and begin the program formally. Welcome to the Fred Jones Jr. Museum of Art. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mark White. I'm the Wiley Dean and Bill Saxon Director of the museum, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Renegades, Bruce Goff and the American School, collaboration between the Christopher Gibbs School of Architecture here at the University of Oklahoma, or College of Architecture, I'm so sorry about that, and the museum. This exhibit has been the result of a fruitful collaboration over the past couple of years as the College of Architecture has realized a really fantastic and, I think, intellectually stimulating investigation of not only Goff's legacy, but the legacy of the American School. Not just really the College of Architecture itself, but how the architects who were involved with study here at OU transformed the American landscape, not only within the state of Oklahoma, but certainly across the nation. And the exhibit is a wonderful example of how the American School put their ideas, their innovative and experimental practice into a reality that we can still enjoy. So thank you for being here tonight and being a part of that. I do want to say before I begin with the program that we also have another exhibit open tonight. That is O. Gale Poole's Sideshow, which is open in the mezzanine upstairs. That will run until June. And one of our next programs will be on February 20th, in which the daughter of O. Gale Poole, Nicole Poole, will be offering a lecture, and we'll have a reception for that. But without further ado, let me introduce our panelists tonight who are here to talk about the exhibit and putting this really monumental and important project together. To begin with, I will introduce Dr. Angela Pearson, I messed that one up too. Dr. Angela Pearson, who will be introducing the project to you all and then handing off from there to Dr. Luca Guido. So, without further ado, Dr. Pearson.
Thank you so much, Dr. White, and thank you all for joining us this evening. This exhibition is the culmination of over 3 years of work involving more than 100 faculty, students, staff, and supporters. Building on the previous work of Friends of Caviar, as well as David DeLong, Donald McDonald, Lynn Rostashill, and others, our team has had the pleasure of exploring the history and legacy of the American School. I'm excited to share with you a brief overview of the American School. In 1970, New York Times critic Ada Louise Huxtable implored her readers to visit an exhibition on the work of Bruce Goff, writing, quote, "Go to the League, gentlemen and ladies, even if those gold and silver presentation boards and houses like Starfish, Viking ships, and teepees give you fits. If you can shed that eugenically frightening New England Calvinist Harvard Bauhaus intellectual frigidity, if you can suppress a reaction to some obviously homegrown corn, there's an artist here. There's a consistent statement of art and purpose, a sensitivity to the land, a last stand half-triumph of the romantic individualist in a world that is forcing the architect to conform increasingly to standardized formulas and business practices," end quote. By 1970, Goff was known for projects like the Ford House in Illinois, shown here. Projects that combined organic forms with local and ready-made materials, in this case, Quonset hut ribs. He had become known for creating otherworldly interiors, rooms as hanging pods, interior fountains and gardens, homes with a strong connection to the natural environment. Goff was also a teacher. As chairman of the University of Oklahoma School of Architecture in the 1950s, he developed a radically original approach to teaching. Goff never went to architecture school, so he didn't follow an existing model. Instead, he believed the job of a teacher was to bring out the individual creativity of each student. This was in direct opposition to most other pedagogical models at the time, which promoted a master-disciple relationship between teacher and student. Goff recruited faculty including Mendel Glickman, most well known as Frank Lloyd Wright's structural engineer, Herb Green, Elizabeth Bauer Mock, Faye Jones, and others. Together, they developed a curriculum grounded not in a style, but rather in Goff's belief in the creative potential of each individual, and in sincere response to people, place, time, materials, and spirit. In answer to this approach, students came from around the world to study at OU under Goff, from Japan, Canada, Peru, Greece, and beyond. Architect Donald McDonald later described what developed at OU as the American School. This school was a place like no other. Rick Hunter, an OU alum, described what it was like to arrive at this strange school in the late 1940s. Quote, "I arrived at the university and walked into this war barracks building on the North Campus, and I was just blown away. I was blown away by the interior, by what he had done with strings and painting things black, and all this incredible work up on the walls by students. I think probably within about 5 seconds I had decided this was where I had to come." As McDonald described, at OU there emerged, quote, "a truly American ethic, which is being formulated without the usual influence of the European or Asian architectural forms and methodologies common on the east and west coasts of the United States," end quote. The radical creativity of the American school students and practitioners doesn't fit neatly into histories that seek to trace cultural developments back to European origins. Susan King, the curator of an American school exhibition at the AA in London, explained this oversight in the history books, quote, "In the minds of the Ivy Leaguers and big city critics, the jump was from Beaux-Arts to Bauhaus because it allowed them to retain their umbilical cord to Europe. The American school cut that umbilical cord," end quote. The University of Oklahoma College of Architecture stood apart from the Beaux-Arts and Bauhaus and developed an original and authentically American approach to architecture and pedagogy. The OU faculty rejected the rote copying of classical architecture as well as the abstract minimalist approach popular elsewhere. Students were taught to look to sources beyond the accepted canon of Western architecture and to find inspiration in everyday objects, the natural landscape, and non-Western cultures such as the designs of American Indian tribes. While OU students developed a keen awareness of global architectural history, when they arrived in the design studio, they were instructed, do not try to remember. Do not begin with classical column capitals and proportional systems or modernist pilotis and grids. Do not begin by imitating the designs of your instructor. Do not arrive at the beginning with the end already in mind. Instead, begin fresh. Begin with the natural context, the slope of the land, the quality of the light, and the local materials. Be earnest in attempting to respond to the program. Sincerely listen to the needs and desires of the client. Most importantly, begin by trusting your own creative instincts. Today, we affectionately refer to the practitioners who emerged from this American School of Architecture as renegades. Tonight, we invite you to shed any lingering intellectual frigidity and open your mind to the American School. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Luca Guido, curator of the Renegades exhibition. Dr. Guido will provide you with an overview of the exhibition contents.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you all for coming to the opening. I want to begin in a humble way, quoting Bruce Goff. What made the School of Architecture at the University of Oklahoma so different? First, we all agreed that education should be a matter of bringing something creative and individual out of a student, instead of packing them their head full of prefabricated education, which would make them, at best, only a follower or imitative. We believed with Thomas Carlyle, the ideal is within yourself. Your condition is but the stuff you are to shape the same ideal out of. Gustav Klimt, the great Viennese painter, said, "There is only sense in being a teacher, and that is if you can liberate the genius in others." That is what we tried to do at OU, and it gave the School of Architecture direction and discipline in freedom, unquote. Unfortunately, Goff's pedagogy has not been acknowledged by the most important books on the history of architecture, and this architectural work still remains little known outside a small circle of lovers. Goff's teaching and buildings were often underestimated by critics and other architects who were sarcastic and used derogatory remarks. The distinguished English historian Rainer Banham defined Goff as, quote, a sort of hipster without formal academic training, unquote. Charles Jenks, the famous American-British architectural critic, making a backhanded compliment, described Goff as the Michelangelo of kitsch. David DeLong also recalled Louis Kahn's angry denunciation to Goff's work as, quote, an architecture of cock bottles and old locomotives parts. In other books or articles, Goff is defined as a laughingstock, a maverick, a rebel. Serious studies of Goff's pedagogical approach are still missing because of such remarks. To summarize, the majority of the architectural historians ignore Goff, the real significance of his architectural experience, and his attitude to develop unconventional and new ideas. Historians reduced him as a strange, eccentric, and isolated architect. So I asked myself why this happens. Why is Goff forgotten from the history of contemporary architecture? What are the reasons behind the underestimation of Goff? The systematic ostracism that excluded Goff from the books of history of architecture was due to several reasons. But we can try to highlight at least one reason. His different pedagogical approach to architecture that didn't fit the main narrative trend of modern architectural history. This assumption is behind the entire show. Goff's teaching was completely different from any other kind of approach experimented after the Second World War in the US. The American architectural culture was oriented towards European precedents. All critics and historians highlighted the importance of the European modern architecture. Moreover, the most important American schools were led by European architects. In this frame, what Goff did at the University of Oklahoma during his direction of the School of Architecture between 1947 and to 1955 represents an important exception to the Bauhaus and the Beaux-Arts approaches, the typical models for a school of architecture in the US. No warmed over ideas, titled The Sooner Magazine, the University of Oklahoma publication of November 1951, describing the School of Architecture. To understand the type of creative design promoted by Goff through his Pedagogy, it is useful to look at his own body of work designed while he was at the University of Oklahoma. For this reason, the exhibition focuses only on a few buildings designed by Goff. Goff designed about 1,000 designs and built about 150 buildings. The first project designed while he was a professor here at OU was the Ledbetter House, built in Norman at the end of the 40s. The building was considered an oddity at the time. Life magazine registered the faces of some of the 14,000 curious people who visited the house during the opening. The article was entitled Consternation and Bewilderment in Oklahoma. The message to students and colleagues was clear. Don't be a follower or imitator of others, and don't be ashamed of reaction of the people to new ideas in architecture. These ideals were vividly apparent in Goff's students. The work of the students reflects the same creative freedom and affinity, and it is the main focus of the exhibit. The exhibition includes over 150 drawings, photos, documents, and objects, many of which are drawn from the newly created American School Archive in the OU libraries. Archive materials, so photos and original drawings by students and architects of the American School highlight the creativity and the originality of their work. Organized in 3 sections, the exhibition tells the story of dramatic change in architectural education in the US. From Beaux-Arts to Bauhaus, the first section highlights the evolution in American architecture schools from the 30s to the end of the 40s, focusing on a crucial turning point that was also a common path for many schools, including OU. The second section, Bruce Goff and the School of Architecture at OU, showcases the curriculum and the student work produced at OU, as well as the work of other faculty members at the time. A series of walls and tables will guide you through the astonishing drawings and other materials, such as photos, magazines, and models. This section is the core of the show. It includes a selection of drawings from Goff's 4th-year design studio class. A spiral room features a series of lost works, our homage to Lini Rostochil, mid-century advocate who fought to preserve modern architecture in Oklahoma. Bruce Goff and his legacy, the 3rd section, highlights the built works of American school architects around the world and showcases how design ideas can affect the real world. If you would like to see more, the exhibition catalog includes over 190 stunning photographs and reproductions of drawings. It's available for pre-order from OU Press. In January 1930, an exhibition of drawings from the New York Beaux-Arts Institute of Design was organized at the University of Oklahoma School of Architecture. Curated by Joss May, who was the director of the school, it celebrated the beginning of the first curriculum in architecture and its connection with the Beaux-Arts tradition. Today, January 2020, 90 years later, we celebrate another tradition. In one of the university catalogs published during Goff's years, it is written that, quote, "The School of Architecture endeavors to develop the creative powers of the student as an individual rather than to enslave them to theories of the past or present. The school gives sense of direction in order to prepare them for a creative career in architecture," unquote. Goff's work in teaching as well as the work of his pupils, suggests that designer's vision can move architectural reality into a domain closer to the worlds of fantasy and dream. In a boxy building, you have boxy life. They should have imagined. Architecture for a democratic society should be totally free. Space itself, far from any architectural stereotype, and conceived for free, creative individuals. This was in Oklahoma from 1947 to 1955, and it looks like the day after tomorrow. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you Bridget Burke, OU Libraries Associate Dean for Special Collection.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about a different perspective on that. I am responsible for the archives that are growing in the university libraries as a result of this project. So, architecture and archives, two words that bear a common beginning, but serve really different ends. Architecture denotes mastery and production. Archives concerns preservation and access to materials. It's my pleasure to have the role of bringing those two objectives together in the American School of Architecture archives. So how is this all coming together? Building the archive is an act of recovery. The documents and drawings created by OU architecture faculty and students are scattered in campus buildings and hidden in the offices and homes of alumni. The material comes to the archives rolled in mailing tubes or tucked in cardboard boxes. Archivists in the libraries take pains to organize and describe the material and protect and preserve fragile items. Our goal is to make the archive available to students, to scholars, and practitioners interested in the work of Bruce Goff and his associates. The exhibit here at the museum is evidence of the role of the archive and the library as a counterpoint to that narrative of do not try to remember. Archives are sites of memory. They document what happened here in Norman, but they're also gateways into the creative process and practice of architecture in America in the post-war era. Archives document what occurred, right? We believe you go to the archives, you find out what happened. But they also document what didn't. They are often the sole evidence of roads not taken and plans not realized, what was built and what wasn't. Architectural archives preserve what we might call the spatial imaginary, the ideas executed only on paper, like student work, as well as evidence of the buildings constructed and later demolished. The American School archives, by preserving these spatial imaginaries, document what was and is and what might have been and used to be. So the archives preserve different versions of the past. It's important to acknowledge that even the renegade architects of the American School needed access to a past to not remember. That past actually lived in the program's library. As my colleagues have noted, Bruce Goff did not set his students down in a vacuum, but actively promoted the value of the department's architectural library and their massive collection of glass slides. Goff believed that these resources would, quote, inspire the students' growing curiosity about the individual creative drive in all architecture of all times, unquote. Students in the Oklahoma architecture program were exposed to a world of design elements, a Windsor chair, a Mesoamerican vessel, a Gothic facade, and their renegade work was informed by access to evidence of a rich architectural past that they could choose to forget or resist or reject or adopt. In building the American School Archive, it's important to remember, too, that this initiative will become part of a larger set of resources available on campus. The American School Archive exists within a complex web of collections that invite in-depth and comparative studies of architectural practice and the built environment. Within the libraries, the University Archives documents the history of the University of Oklahoma. The Western History collections hold material on habitation and the land use in Oklahoma and the West. And our rare book collections include early architectural works, treatises on scientific aspects and mechanical aspects of the building trades, and literatures of place that enrich the value of the new archive that we are creating. In the end, we build collections because we would really like people to use them. Scholars, practicing architects and builders, historic preservationists, community development, and legal and regulatory interests are all served by architectural archives. For buildings that still stand, the archive connects conception and realization. For projects that were never built, archives offer alternatives, questioning the inevitability of our existing built landscape. While enchanted and obsessed with the archives as memory and as alternate reality, it is the materiality of the architectural archive, all that big, flat stuff, as well as letters, journals, and glass slides, that becomes the focus of our archival effort. Materials are arriving in boxes and rolls, portfolio cases, and brown paper envelopes, all beautifully addressed in architect handwriting, which I have come to love as an archivist. Thank you. Their homecoming is a physical fact, as well as a creative kind of confluence. And we are very happy when they arrive, so that's the Harvey Ferrer collection. In closing, what I really want to impress about the exhibition here at the Fred Jones Jr. Museum of Art is its newness. Almost all of the material currently on display in this building was unavailable 18 months ago. The project to collect the archives of OU architects and their students has gained momentum as word spreads. The exhibitions and programming create opportunities to connect with former students, associates, and clients, and to build enthusiasm and engagement around the archive. The American School Project is unfolding in many spaces. It is made manifest in virtual reality environments and in 3D printed models. It thrives in the pedagogical spaces of classroom and studio and symposia. And it is at its most visually compelling in the interpretive and social space of exhibitions. All of these venues prove that we do in fact try to remember and celebrate our past, and we use the archive to help us to do so. I'm so grateful to the College of Architecture for their leadership and partnership in building this resource, and for the many donors, many names you will see on the captions downstairs, who have generously contributed to make the American School Archive a reality. With that, I have the pleasure of handing the podium to Michael Hoffner, exhibition designer.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I'm so grateful to have been given the opportunity to work with so many talented people over the past year to finally realize tonight in built form what we've been working on. But in particular, I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Stephanie Pilot, the director of the College of Architecture, and Hans Butzer for trusting me with this project. So thank you very much. This first slide is a diagram of exhibit design, and it's studying the circulation through a space. As Dr. Guido mentioned, there are three components to the exhibition. So the challenge was to guide visitors through a circuit of observation in a way that helps them understand what the curator is trying to explain. So note the swirling forms that you see in this diagram, because they're going to come up again. Herb Green, Prairie House, Norman, Oklahoma, 1961. The thing to note here is the use of shingles and 2x4s. These are common construction materials. Common construction materials are produced in forms to be used in rectilinear designs. As you'll see in the exhibit, the Prairie House is just one example of how American school architects use the idea of overlapping, staggering, and shingling to simulate organic forms, to assume those shapes. Bruce Goff, the Bavinger House, Norman, Oklahoma, built in 1955, destroyed in 2016. The thing to note here is that the curvilinear plan of the house will be seen again in the plan for the exhibit design. Many of you are familiar with the Bavinger House and the fact that it is indeed a spiral in plan. In the next slide, you'll see that the floor plan of the exhibit design also uses curvilinear and spiral shapes to divide the exhibit into the three sections that Dr. Guido has defined for the project. These curved shapes and spiral elements reinforced and suggest a path for the visitor to take through the space. This is an early plan of the exhibit design. It was interesting to discover that a full-size plan of the Bavinger House fits neatly into the space provided by the Records Gallery. So it seemed inevitable that elements of the Bavinger geometry would have a presence in the exhibit design. And thankfully, it does a very nice job of reinforcing a path through the space and dividing the space into the three components that Dr. Guido has prescribed for this exhibit. In the next slide, you'll see how the floor plan of the exhibit design also uses curvilinear shapes. But to work in the gallery, the spiral form itself needed to be flipped, chopped up a little bit, and reorganized to actually work with the path through the space. So it's not the literal shape of it's not the literal plan of the Bavinger House, but as a visitor, it might be interesting to note that the dimensions and the shapes of the curves are built to the dimension and shape of the Bavinger House. So as you walk along these faceted walls, you are in a sense experiencing the plan form of the Bavinger House. The other thing to note here is that these overlapping shingling spaces that you see on the gallery walls are used to, again, simulate this organic shape, much like the American school architects did to render organic shapes using ordinary materials. This is a study model built for a component of the exhibit design. Architects and architecture students use cardboard study models to test ideas in three-dimensional space. Visitors to the exhibit will notice that the wall finishes and exhibit furniture resembles a full-size cardboard model. In expanding upon the American school characteristic of resourcefulness, an additional advantage of using cardboard for a temporary exhibit is that the material can be recycled after redone. In the next slide, you'll see some process photos of another reusable element included in the exhibition space. Along the way, the exhibit became a design-build project. Wasn't expecting that. Design-build in the sense of the American school work means that the architect is involved hands-on on a daily basis during construction. So for the past 3 weeks, I, along with scores of other people, have been in the gallery, have been at the Creating Making Lab, have been traveling all around, picking up ordinary building materials to become a part of this exhibit that you'll see tonight. So here we see architecture student Lorenzo Perez. He's at the College of Architecture's Digital Fabrication Lab that we call CML. And he's fabricating part of a plywood structure that is an installation in the exhibit. And since I happen to own a pickup, I got elected to haul these pieces that Lorenzo made to Blue River Construction, where they were married together with some other wood constructions that were built using analog methods. By the way, this plot that you see, this giant piece of paper, is 76 feet long, and they are full-size drawings to be made into templates of what Lorenzo Perez made in CML. The longest plot in Triangle A&E history is what Bill told me. More design build. These are students working on fabricating a wall finish in the exhibit area. This is the same cardboard that was used to build that little study model that you saw a moment ago. And here's a preview of what you will see from the SketchUp model when you enter the space. This is what you'll see when you pass through the Beaux-Arts section and begin to enter the main exhibit space. And I hope everyone enjoys the exhibit. I hope that you all feel that the American School works have been given a suitable and comfortable space that complements the aspects of the work without overwhelming or trying to upstage the work. I thank you for your interest. I thank you for being here to experience the culmination over a year's work of design work. Thanks very much. And up next is the Dean of the College of Architecture, Hans Putzer.
Thank you, Michael. What a magnificent design, and certainly congratulations to you, to Luca, and to the entire team for really what is an inspired piece of exploration, and one which I hope all of you just can't wait to go see. But this is certainly a moment to take and thank many of the generous donors who helped make this exhibition possible, including Vince Mancini, Joe Buskell, William Newton Jr., and the many alumni who donated their works to the American School Archive. We would like to recognize the support of the Office of the Provost, the Vice President for Research, the OU Libraries, including Dean Carl Grant and certainly his incredible staff and team, and certainly, obviously, the incredible partnership with the Fred Jones Jr. Museum of Art. Mark, thank you very much to you and your team. This is also an important time to honor Lynn Rostichil, who just a few weeks ago passed away. As many of you know, Lynn was a tireless advocate for historic preservation in Oklahoma, and she contributed her expertise to the Lost Works portion of this exhibition. And I encourage you to go see her website that she helped co-found Okimod. It's an incredible website where you'll learn so much about some of the works shown off here today, and so much more of just the inspired work that helps shape our Oklahoma culture. What would be a Gibbs College of Architecture initiative without the great leadership and follow-through of Dr. Angela Pearson? Angela, thank you so much again, my Director of Strategic Initiatives at the college. And lastly, I wish to thank Dr. Stephanie Pilot, who chose to be in Italy this evening, as opposed to with us here in Norman. Dr. Pilot has ably helped lead the American School project since it began with my deanship in 2016. And without Stephanie's tireless leadership and advocacy, we would not be here this evening. But in closing, I invite everyone to consider what the American School might mean today. With more than 70 years of distance, are there lessons we might still learn from the wildly creative, contextual, and resourceful work of the American School approach? To answer this question, we need to first consider the pressing challenges of practice and teaching today. In his introduction to the 2016 Venice Architecture Biennale, the curator Alejandro Aravena describes what is at stake for architecture. And we quote here, "We believe that the advancement of architecture is not a goal in itself, but a way to improve people's quality of life. Given that life ranges from very basic physical needs to the most intangible dimensions of the human condition, improving the quality of the built environment is an endeavor that has to tackle many fronts. From guaranteeing very concrete, down-to-earth living standards to interpreting and fulfilling human desires. From respecting the single individual to taking care of the common good. From efficiently hosting daily activities to expanding the frontiers of civilization," end quote. Aravena describes the means through which architecture can and should improve the human condition. He suggests that built environments can accomplish this by integrating the pragmatic with the existential, pertinence and boldness, creativity and common sense. If we accept the premise that architecture has the power to solve real and pressing issues, and I do, what lessons might the teaching and practice of the American school offer? How might the balance of creativity and pragmatism taught by Bruce Goff and his colleagues be relevant today? The problems of our current moment are, by many measures, alarming and require bold, creative solutions. For example, the challenges associated with our changing climate are diverse and potentially catastrophic, including food insecurity, rising sea levels, and increased temperatures. Globally, we face an aging and growing population with nearly 1 billion people over the age of 60, many requiring significant physical and medical accommodations. Meanwhile, nearly 60 million people are living as refugees, and 1 in 9 people is undernourished. In light of these issues, what are the most significant traces of the American school's influence, and how might it offer ideas for how to address contemporary challenges? 4 key aspects of the American school approach warrant consideration, both in terms of the legacy of the inspired and their relevance to contemporary issues. First, the legacy of the American school pedagogy, initially shaped by Goff, can be traced through the work of architect educators like Herb Green and Bob Faust, who adapted the approach to schools beyond the boundaries of Oklahoma, such as at Auburn and Kentucky. Second, the American school emphasis on sincere engagement with people and places anticipates in many ways a turn toward embracing the local while calling for more participatory design practices. Third, the material resourcefulness and environmental consciousness of the American school inspired visionary attempts to reconceive how we humans inhabit our planet, most notably in the Biosphere 2, designed by OU alum Phil Hawes, class of 1962, both a planner and architect. And finally, the experimental and organic forms of the American school often provoke comparisons with a new organicism made possible by developments in parametric design and digital fabrication technology. Frank Gehry wrote that Bruce Goff was, and I quote here, "the model iconoclast, the paradigm of America, the antidote to Gropius's pontifical European presence, one of the roads to an American architecture." Today, we find the tactics of American school iconoclasts, or renegades, prevalent in both architectural pedagogy and practice. Designers now routinely consider how to design resourcefully and work sincerely with clients and sites. Organic form is once again the subject of creative exploration. Design-build programs are now ubiquitous and celebrated as a means of teaching students firsthand through the labor of construction. The imagined and built work of American school architects suggests that we can achieve bolder solutions when we embrace the specificity and individuality of the conditions at hand. In closing, we suggest that the sustainable, hyperlocal, and pedagogical components of this legacy are particularly relevant to contemporary social and environmental issues. Consider the challenges that society hasn't yet fully defined, including those mentioned earlier: climate change, aging and growing populations, access to healthy foods, as well as the rapid pace of technological development. We're in a period in which do not try to remember is more important than ever. We are facing a future that will look dramatically different from the places we have been designing over the past 25 years, or 250 years for that matter. Now more than ever, we can't assume that what worked in the past will work in the future. We need students today of agency who are personally and collectively invested in resourcefulness, in listening to their clients and communities, and in knowing not only how to create, but also how to make the future with one's own hands. Thank you very much. And now, I'd like to invite Mark, certainly to the front, and we invite you and all to participate in the conversation. Mark, take it away.
Okay. All right. Questions for our panelists? Yes. That's okay. Did everyone hear the question? So for the record, the criticism over Frank Gehry's structures suggests that we have not come so far from the Bauhaus model. True?
Well, for starters, I would say it's a great thing people are talking about architecture, right? I mean, that's an important position, right? What we're all trying to do is contribute to the conversation of how we build our future. And certainly through the work of Frank Gehry, who revered Bruce Goff, we see a different form of experimental architecture. Frank Gehry values slightly different things those things that were valued by architects of the American school, right? But I think ultimately what we're seeing is a community that is more willing to accept different versions of our community, different versions of our identity, right? And in many ways, and you're talking about the Experience Museum, right? In Seattle, this Experience Project, right? There are many people who love it. Many people love it too, right? Many people love it too, right? But I just want to come back to my original point. We need to be designing places that engage, right? That make us alive, that make us rethink the reality of our existence, to help the human experience become more visceral, and hopefully contribute to an ongoing conversation about how we should make our place and how it relates to future people and the planet. I have not yet, no.
Yes. So just for the recording, the question is whether Bruce Goff and the American School would have utilized utilized computers and other digital formats.
Jump on this, and then I'll give the floor to you. I just have I love the question. A few years ago, I visited the Bruce Goff archives at the Art Institute of Chicago, and came across a lecture that he had given where he talks about computeritis. And during that presentation, he actually lamented how computers would rob us of the creative potential of the architect. I just wanted to kind of preface this. And I give the floor now to my esteemed scholar colleague, Dr. Guido.
Yeah, building on that, what I can add, these people, in particular Bruce Goff's pupils, they were students here in the 50s, and at the time there was no use of computer in architecture. It is something very recent. I would say that they were a wonderful draftsmen. Looking at the drawings. So, thinking about nowadays, I believe that the American school architects are fascinating with technology because we move from a generation to another generation, and there is a lot to learn from the architects and the students that we are featuring in the show. And as you can see in the third section of the show, this legacy is still alive. So definitely at the time in the 50s, they couldn't use any program, any software because that. But we are building in the College of Architecture on that legacy. And our students nowadays, they use.
Okay, so Bruce Goff, likely not a fan of Google SketchUp. Another question? Yes. Okay, so how do we go back to experimentation and the sort of free-spirited nature of the American school of the 1950s?
This is interesting. It's difficult to answer now. I believe today's society asks to designers, architects to be aware about issues that 70 years ago, so it would be wonderful to integrate new requests from the new society, same spirit of creativity. I believe that is possible. I believe that is a very interesting challenge.
Add that as I taught at the College of Architecture and when I began to become involved with the American School Project, I really embraced the idea of the instructors bringing out. I thought that was wonderful, so I started doing that. Finding out what they're interested in, allowing them to modify the program, not radically, but enough to allow them to pursue their lines of what NAB requires, right? So I think that there is having maybe the best of both worlds possible, right? So that students can explore their satisfy the NAB requirements. So as long as the students are not making the project too easy, I think it's fine to allow that creative energy better to allow them. That increases their buy-in.
I just want to add, the architecture program during Goff's tenure here was accredited. Okay. And so I think it's an important detail here as a part of this conversation. The other detail I think that's important to remember is that accreditation is a minimum standard, right? It's just like, it's the least we could do, right? Here at OU, and certainly with our colleagues here and from Stillwater, we focus on the aspirational, and really that's what tonight is about, right? Is that to which we aspire.
Yes. So the biggest surprise in terms of all of the gifts that were...
And we might all answer that because, of course, it's been super structured and highly, packed way. It's coming in because of personal connections, and so I always find surprising and valuable about archives is that, it's a really personal connection when people give you all on the stage been in the position of being. I really value that. I value the phone calls from the people who couldn't be here tonight about a piece of paper in the archive. I didn't really know that it was all that important, but it was. So that's important to me.
Add two thoughts. One of the more beautiful aspects to receiving some of these archives that come through the mail are the letters, very personal letters, and absolutely unsolicited, where these individuals who studied here or were inspired by this place write such impassioned recollections of their time here, what it meant to study with Herb Green, their classmates here, and their adventures out into the practice of architecture. And that's, for me, always a surprise, just how moved our students were.
Kept this stuff for 60 years, kind of intuitively value to it. And I love that idea that we're actually seeing their young selves and their older selves reflecting upon actually don't often get in archives, right? You're taking
I'll just add here on a more lighthearted perspective. We've just mentioned rolls or drawings coming quietly through the mail. The most exciting, I guess, receipt I've experienced so far is when I received a call from one of our alumni who got on the phone and said, "Hans, are you in your office?" I said, "Yes." "Hey, will you come outside, please? Come out to the street?" I said, "Okay." So I ran out to the street. There's a car waiting. The trunk pops open. This gentleman hands me a roll of drawings, puts them in my arms, and says, "I'm not telling you where they came from." And he drove right off. And that was it. Okay? So this is a very exciting experience, too. It's not just waiting for the slow mail.
All right, so we're going to hope everything in the exhibit's legal. We have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Frank Lloyd Wright loved the School of Architecture. It was reciprocal. Wright always considered Bruce Goff one of his students. Goff didn't spend a day under Frank Lloyd Wright. So, by the way, they also shared the same birthday.
Well, I'm sorry to conclude there, but I do want to give you a chance to see the exhibit. The museum will be open until 9. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. If you haven't had a chance to see the publication, it is on display upstairs. It's fantastic. Also, give the virtual reality walkthrough of several Goff structures a try. Very intricately developed by Skyline Inc., and that is available in the exhibition itself. Thank you so much. The reception continues outside, and the exhibit is open.